The dust-laden wind swept across the desolate train depot as Clara Norwood clutched her threadbare valise, the last remnant of her former life in Boston. The year was 1875, and the promise of a new beginning had carried her 2,000 miles west to Porterville, California, a town she knew only from yellowed newspaper advertisements and the flowery letters of a man she had never met. Her intended husband, one Harold Jenkins, was nowhere to be seen, and the last passengers from the train had long since dispersed, leaving her alone with the setting sun painting the Sierra Nevada foothills a haunting crimson. Clara dabbed at her forehead with a lace-trimmed handkerchief, the sweat beading despite the cooling evening air. 24 years old and unmarried had made her a subject of whispers back east, especially after her parents' passing left her with nothing but debts and a tarnished family name. The advertisement had seemed heaven-sent. Respectable gentleman of means seeks educated Eastern bride for companionship and assistance with mercantile business. 3 months of correspondence had culminated in this moment, standing abandoned at a depot in a town that smelled of cattle, dust, and broken dreams. The station master, an elderly man with rheumy eyes, had locked the ticket office an hour ago, tipping his hat with something like pity. "Perhaps he was delayed, miss. Might be along shortly," he'd said, though his tone suggested otherwise. The sound of hoofbeats drew Clara's attention away from her increasingly desperate thoughts. A rider approached from the direction of town, his silhouette growing more distinct against the darkening sky. The horse, a magnificent chestnut stallion, snorted as the man pulled it to a halt several paces from where she stood. "Miss Norwood." His voice was deep, carrying on the evening air with a gentle authority that made her spine straighten instinctively. "Yes," she answered, her throat suddenly dry. "I am Clara Norwood. Are you acquainted with Mr. Jenkins?" The stranger dismounted in one fluid motion, revealing himself to be tall and broad-shouldered, his face partially obscured by the brim of his Stetson. As he stepped closer, Clara could see his features clearly, a strong jaw covered with several days' worth of stubble, sun-weathered skin that spoke of years under the harsh western sun, and eyes the color of a summer storm. "I'm Ethan Xavier," he said, removing his hat and holding it against his chest in a gesture of respect. "Ranch owner outside of town. I regret to inform you that Harold Jenkins passed 3 weeks ago. Influenza took him quick." He paused, seemingly searching for the right words. "The station master sent word to my place when you arrived. Figured someone should tell you proper." Clara felt the world spin momentarily. The future she had planned, however uncertain, had evaporated entirely. "I see," she managed, her knuckles white around the handle of her valise. I suppose I shall have to purchase a return ticket in the morning." Ethan Xavier studied her face, noting the flash of desperation she fought to conceal. "The eastbound train won't come through for another week," he said. "There's a hotel in town," but he glanced toward Porterville, his expression clouding. "It's not a place for a lady alone." Clara squared her shoulders, summoning what remained of her dignity. "I am quite capable of managing, Mr. Xavier. I thank you for delivering this. Unfortunate news." She made to step past him, though where she intended to go remained a mystery even to herself. His voice halted her. "Miss Norwood." She turned, finding him closer than expected, his eyes reflecting a conflict she couldn't quite decipher. "Stay with me," he whispered, the words carried on the evening breeze. "At least until the train comes. My sister lives at the ranch. It would be proper. You'd have a roof, meals, and time to consider your options." Clara's instinct to refuse warred with the stark reality of her situation. Here she was, 2,000 miles from anything familiar, her prospects evaporated with the death of a man she'd never met. The alternative, a week alone in a frontier town with dwindling funds, seemed suddenly more frightening than accompanying this stranger. "Why would you offer such kindness to someone you've never met?" she asked, suspicion edging her voice. Ethan Xavier replaced his hat, his expression unreadable. "Jenkins was a good man. He spoke highly of you in his letters, read parts to half the town when they'd arrive." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Besides, leaving a lady stranded goes against everything my mother taught me." Clara weighed her options, such as they were. The sun had nearly disappeared behind the mountains, and with it, any remaining warmth in the air. Her thin traveling coat offered little protection against the desert night that was rapidly approaching. "I accept your offer, Mr. Xavier," she finally said, "until the train arrives." He nodded, taking her valise before she could protest. "Can you ride?" When she shook her head, he added, "Then you'll have to ride with me. Town's nearly a mile away, and the ranch is another 3 beyond that." Before she could form a proper objection, he had secured her small trunk to his saddle and extended his hand. Clara hesitated only a moment before placing her gloved fingers in his calloused palm, allowing him to help her onto the horse before mounting behind her. "Hold tight to the saddle horn," he instructed, his breath warm against her ear as he reached around her to take the reins. As they rode away from the depot, Clara Norwood found herself acutely aware of the stranger's presence, the solid wall of his chest at her back, the strength in his arms as he guided the horse, and the faint scent of leather and pine that surrounded him. She had come west to marry a merchant she'd never met. Now she was riding into the gathering darkness with a rancher who had appeared like an apparition at her moment of greatest need. The road to Porterville was rutted and uneven, illuminated only by the rising moon and the distant pinpricks of light that marked the town ahead. Clara clung to the saddle horn as instructed, every muscle tense as she tried to maintain a proper distance between herself and the man behind her, an impossible task on horseback. "I should warn you about Porterville," Ethan said as they approached the first scattered buildings at the town's edge. "It's not Boston. The mining boom brought all sorts here, not all of them God-fearing or law-abiding." "I was under the impression it was a civilized settlement," Clara replied, recalling the glowing descriptions in Harold Jenkins' letters. A soft chuckle rumbled through Ethan's chest. Jenkins had a way of seeing the best in things. "The town's growing, got a church and school now, but it's still rough around the edges." They rode down the main street, past a saloon where tinny piano music spilled into the night along with raucous laughter. Men loitered outside, some calling out crude remarks as they passed. Clara stiffened, but Ethan merely tipped his hat, his pace never slowing. "That's Jenkins' store," he said, nodding toward a darkened building with a faded sign reading Jenkins Mercantile. "His nephew's coming from Sacramento to take it over, but he won't arrive for another month." Clara felt a pang of what might have been. The Mercantile was modest but well-built, with large display windows and a covered porch. It would have been her home, her new beginning. They continued through town and out the other side, the buildings giving way to scattered homesteads and eventually open country. The moon had risen fully now, bathing the landscape in silver light. In the distance, Clara could make out the dark silhouette of mountains against the star-filled sky. "Your ranch, is it a large operation?" she asked, breaking the silence that had fallen between them. "Large enough," Ethan replied. 2,000 acres, couple hundred head of cattle. Been in my family since '49, when my father came for gold and stayed for the land instead." "And your sister, she manages the household?" "Catherine does more than that. She runs the books, handles supplies, and still finds time to make the best apple pie in the county." There was unmistakable pride in his voice. "Our parents passed 5 years back, influenza same as Jenkins. It's been just the two of us since." Clara nodded, though he couldn't see it. There was something reassuring about knowing another woman would be present at the ranch. Whatever Mr. Xavier's intentions, she wouldn't be alone with him. After riding for what seemed like hours, they crested a small rise, and Clara gasped softly. Below them stretched a valley, and nestled within it was a cluster of buildings. The main house was 2 stories, larger than she had expected, with a wide porch wrapping around the front. Light glowed from several windows, warm and inviting in the darkness. "Xavier Ranch," Ethan announced, a note of pride evident in his voice. "Been meaning to build a proper house for years, but we get by with what my father built." As they approached, a woman appeared on the porch, her slender figure silhouetted by the lamplight behind her. She waved as they rode into the yard, descending the steps as Ethan brought the horse to a stop. "Ethan Xavier, you were supposed to be back hours ago." Her voice carried a mixture of concern and exasperation. "I was about to send Miguel to," she stopped short, noticing Clara for the first time. "Oh, I didn't realize you had company." Ethan dismounted in one fluid motion, then reached up to help Clara down. Her legs, unaccustomed to riding, nearly buckled beneath her, and she found herself gripping his arms for support. "Catherine, this is Miss Clara Norwood," Ethan explained, steadying Clara before stepping back to a respectable distance. She arrived on today's train expecting to meet Jenkins. Understanding dawned immediately on Ethan Xavier's face. She was younger than Clara had expected, perhaps 21 or 22, with the same storm-colored eyes as her brother and a cloud of dark hair pinned haphazardly atop her head. "Oh, you poor dear," Catherine said, stepping forward to take Clara's hands in her own. "What terrible timing. Come inside at once, you must be exhausted and starving." Before Clara could respond, Catherine had linked arms with her and was guiding her toward the house, leaving Ethan to deal with the horse and luggage. "Don't mind my brother's gruff manner," Catherine confided as they climbed the porch steps. "He's been that way since our parents died, all business and responsibility. But he has a good heart." The interior of the Xavier home was surprisingly refined for a cattle ranch. The entryway opened to a spacious living area with a stone fireplace, comfortable-looking furniture, and bookshelves lining one wall. Colorful rugs softened the wooden floors, and oil lamps cast a warm glow throughout the space. "Our mother was from San Francisco," Catherine explained, noting Clara's surprised expression. "She insisted on bringing a bit of civilization with her. Father complained about the expense of shipping furniture all the way from the coast, but he never could deny her anything." Clara removed her traveling coat and hat, suddenly aware of her rumpled appearance after days on the train. "I must look a fright," she murmured, attempting to smooth her skirts. Catherine waved away her concerns. "Nonsense. Besides, there's no one to impress out here except the cattle, and they're notoriously poor judges of fashion." Her easy manner drew a genuine smile from Clara, the first since arriving in California. "Now," Catherine continued, "let me show you to the guest room. You can freshen up while I warm supper. We've plenty of hot water," another of Mother's insistences. Said she'd tolerate the wilderness but draw the line at cold baths. The guest room was small but comfortable, with a brass bed, a washstand with a porcelain basin, and a wardrobe of dark wood. A window overlooked the valley, though in the darkness Clara could see little beyond her own reflection. "I'll bring up hot water for washing," Catherine said, turning to leave. "Oh, and don't worry about Mr. Jenkins or anything else tonight. Rest, eat, and tomorrow will be soon enough to consider your options." Left alone, Clara sank onto the edge of the bed, the events of the day crashing over her like a wave. Harold Jenkins was dead. The future she had carefully planned had evaporated. And now she found herself in the home of strangers, dependent on their charity until the eastbound train arrived. Returning to Boston was the logical choice, yet the thought filled her with dread. What awaited her there but creditors, pitying glances, and perhaps a position as someone's companion or governess? At 24, her prospects had been dim enough to drive her across the continent to marry a stranger. They would be no better upon her return. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Catherine entered with a steaming pitcher, followed by Ethan carrying Clara's trunk and valise. "Where would you like these, Miss Norwood?" he asked, his deep voice oddly formal. "By the wardrobe would be fine, thank you." Clara stood, hands clasped before her, suddenly unsure of how to interact with this man who had rescued her from abandonment yet remained a complete stranger. He set down her belongings with care, then straightened, his hat held respectfully in his hands. "I apologize for the circumstances of our meeting, Miss Norwood. Jenkins spoke highly of you in his letters, said you were educated, well-read, from a good Boston family." Clara felt a flush of embarrassment. Mr. Jenkins was generous in his assessment. "My family was once respectable, but my father's investments failed before his death. I came west because—" She hesitated, unwilling to admit the full extent of her desperation. "Because Jenkins offered a fresh start," Ethan finished for her, nodding. "No shame in that. Half the people in California came for the same reason, myself included." Catherine poured water into the basin, deliberately focusing on her task. "Supper will be ready in 30 minutes, she announced. "Nothing fancy, just beef stew and biscuits." "I wasn't expecting company." "That sounds wonderful," Clara assured her. "I haven't had a proper meal since leaving Kansas City." With a final nod, Ethan retreated, closing the door behind him. Clara could hear his heavy footsteps descending the stairs, followed by the murmur of conversation between the siblings. "Your brother," Clara began hesitantly. "He seems very proper." Catherine laughed, the sound bright in the quiet room. "Ethan? Lord, don't let that fool you. He can curse a blue streak when the cattle break through fencing or the hands show up drunk from town. But Mother drilled manners into us both." She paused, studying Clara with a gaze that seemed to see more than was comfortable. "He's a good man, though. The best I know." After Catherine left, Clara quickly washed away the dust of travel and changed into the least wrinkled of her dresses, a simple blue cotton that had been fashionable in Boston 3 seasons ago. She twisted her hair into a simple knot at the nape of her neck, lamenting the lack of time for a proper bath. Downstairs, the scent of hearty stew guided her to the dining room where Ethan and Catherine were already seated at a sturdy oak table. A third place had been set with surprisingly fine china. "Mother's wedding set," Catherine explained, noting Clara's admiring glance at the delicate floral pattern. "We only use it for special occasions and guests." "I'm hardly an occasion," Clara protested, taking the offered seat. "You're the first female visitor we've had in nearly a year," Catherine replied, passing a basket of biscuits. "The ranchers' wives visit occasionally, but most consider us too far from town for regular socializing." Ethan remained mostly silent through the meal, offering brief responses when directly addressed, but otherwise seeming content to let his sister carry the conversation. Clara noticed how his eyes occasionally studied her when he thought she wasn't looking, not in an improper way, but with a curiosity that made her both uncomfortable and oddly flattered. "Mr. Xavier," she said during a lull in Catherine's cheerful monologue about local gossip, "I want to thank you properly for your assistance today. I dread to think what might have become of me had you not arrived." He looked up from his stew, surprise flickering across his features. "No need for thanks. Anyone would have done the same." "But they didn't," Clara pointed out. "You did." Something passed between them, then a moment of understanding that transcended their brief acquaintance. Catherine glanced between them, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth before she deliberately changed the subject. "Clara, you simply must tell me about Boston fashions. I haven't been further east than Sacramento in 5 years, and the ladies' magazines always arrive months out of date." The conversation flowed more easily after that, with Clara describing the latest styles from the East Coast, while Catherine eagerly absorbed every detail. Ethan excused himself after finishing his meal, mentioning something about checking on a pregnant mare. "He works too hard," Catherine sighed once he had gone. "Has been since our parents died. Feels responsible for everything and everyone." "You seem to manage the household beautifully," Clara observed. "It can't be easy without servants." Catherine laughed. "We have helped Miguel and his wife Elena come up from the workers' quarters daily. Elena cooks most meals and keeps the house tidy, though I sent them home early today since Ethan was in town." She gathered the empty dishes, waving away Clara's attempt to help. "The real challenge is keeping this place running as a business. Cattle prices are down, the railroad charges exorbitant rates for shipping, and the large spreads further north are buying up smaller ranches every day." Clara followed Catherine to the kitchen, insisting on helping with the washing up despite her hostess's protests. As they worked side by side, Clara found herself growing genuinely fond of the younger woman. Catherine was forthright and intelligent, without the artifice that characterized so many of the women Clara had known in Boston society. "May I ask about your plans?" Catherine ventured as they dried the last of the dishes. "Will you return to Boston on next week's train?" Clara placed a plate carefully in the cabinet. "I don't know," she admitted. "There's little for me there now. My parents are gone, our home sold to pay debts. I have a second cousin who might take me in, but—" She trailed off, unwilling to voice the humiliation such a step would entail. "Porterville needs a schoolteacher," Catherine said suddenly. The last one a dreadful man who believed more in the switch than the primer left 2 months ago after an altercation with the blacksmith whose son he'd beaten. Clara blinked in surprise. "I've never taught school. I attended Miss Hathaway's seminary for young ladies, but I have no formal qualifications. Can you read, write, and cipher?" When Clara nodded, Catherine continued. "That's more than half the parents in town can do. The school board is desperate. They've advertised as far as San Francisco with no takers." The idea took root in Clara's mind despite her attempt to dismiss it. Teaching had always appealed to her, though her parents had considered it unsuitable for a daughter of their social standing. Now, with that standing destroyed and her options limited, perhaps. It's just a thought, Catherine said, noting Clara's hesitation. The position comes with a small house behind the schoolhouse and a modest salary. Not what you might have expected as Mrs. Jenkins, but independence of a sort. Independence. The word resonated within Clara like the toll of a bell. She had come west seeking security through marriage. Could she find something more valuable instead? I'll consider it, she said finally. Though I can't imagine the town would hire a stranger with no experience. Catherine's eyes twinkled. You'd be surprised what Porterville will accept out of necessity. Besides, Ethan sits on the school board. His vote carries weight. Before Clara could respond, the back door opened, and Ethan entered, bringing with him the cool night air and the earthy scents of the ranch. He stopped short upon seeing them, as if surprised to find them in the kitchen. Everything all right with Starlight? Catherine asked, hanging the dish towel to dry. Fine. The foal's positioned correctly now. Miguel's sitting with her through the night. He removed his hat, running a hand through hair that curled slightly from sweat despite the cool evening. Miss Norwood, I hope Catherine hasn't been boring you with ranch business. Not at all, Clara assured him. Actually, she mentioned the vacant teaching position in town. I was just saying I might inquire about it. Something flashed in Ethan's eyes, surprise, perhaps, or approval. You'd stay in Porterville? I'm considering my options, Clara replied carefully. Teaching would provide independence while I decide on a more permanent situation. He nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. The school's been closed nearly 2 months. Children running wild, driving their parents to distraction. The board would likely hire you on the spot if you expressed interest. Even without experience or references? A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Miss Norwood, out here, willingness often counts more than qualifications. Jenkins vouched for your education in his letters to half the town. That'll be reference enough. Clara found herself returning his smile, a sense of possibility unfolding before her. It wasn't the future she had traveled west to find, but perhaps it was the one she needed. Then I shall inquire tomorrow, if you would be kind enough to make introductions. It would be my pleasure, Ethan replied, his voice warm in a way that sent an unexpected flutter through Clara's chest. I'll take you into town after breakfast. That night, lying in the unfamiliar bed in the Xavier's guest room, Clara found her thoughts drifting repeatedly to Ethan. There was something compelling about him, a quiet strength that differed from the polished charm of Boston gentlemen. He was direct, honest, occasionally awkward, yet possessed a natural dignity that commanded respect. It was foolish, she knew, to harbor even the slightest romantic thought about a man she had just met, especially when her life remained in such turmoil. Yet as sleep finally claimed her, it was the memory of his whispered "Stay with me" at the depot that followed her into dreams. Morning arrived with golden light streaming through the curtains and the distant sounds of ranch life already in full swing. Clara dressed quickly in her most professional-looking outfit, a navy walking suit with minimal trim that she hoped would convey seriousness without severity. She had just finished pinning up her hair when a knock sounded at the door. Breakfast in 10 minutes, Catherine called through the wood. And Clara? There's hot water for a proper bath waiting for you this evening. No arguments. Clara smiled at the younger woman's maternal tone despite being only a few years her senior. Thank you, Catherine. That sounds heavenly. Downstairs, the morning meal was a heartier affair than Clara was accustomed to. Eggs, bacon, fried potatoes, and biscuits with honey. Ethan was absent, but Catherine explained he'd been up since before dawn checking on the new foal. He'll be in shortly, she assured Clara, pouring coffee into delicate cups that seemed at odds with the substantial fare. Ethan never misses a meal if he can help it. As if summoned, the back door opened, and Ethan strode in, his shirt sleeves rolled up and his face freshly washed. Morning, he greeted them, helping himself to coffee before sitting down. Starlight delivered a healthy colt around dawn, black with a white star, just like his sire. That's wonderful news, Catherine exclaimed. The third foal this season, and all healthy. Clara noticed how Ethan's face softened when he spoke of the horses, his usual reserve giving way to genuine enthusiasm. You breed horses as well as raise cattle? She asked. Started as a hobby of my father's, he explained, filling his plate. Turned out I had a knack for it. Cavalry buyers come twice a year now, and we sell to private ranchers as well. Between the cattle and horses, we managed to stay afloat. More than afloat, Catherine corrected. The Xavier line is becoming known as far as Nevada. Ethan shrugged off the praise, though Clara detected a hint of pride beneath his modesty. We should head to town after breakfast, he said, changing the subject. Mayor Hollister will be at his office until noon, and he chairs the school board. The ride to Porterville was less awkward in daylight, though Clara remained acutely aware of Ethan's proximity as she sat before him on the horse. The landscape revealed itself to be more varied and beautiful than she had noticed in the darkness. Rolling hills dotted with oak trees, patches of wildflowers adding splashes of color to the golden grasses, and the ever-present mountains rising majestically in the distance. "It's beautiful," she remarked, gesturing to the vista before them. "Different from New England, but beautiful in its own way. Changes with the seasons," Ethan replied, his voice close to her ear. "Green and lush in spring, golden in summer, and when the rains come in winter, the hills turn emerald overnight. Some find it harsh, but I've never wanted to live anywhere else." Clara nodded, understanding. There was an honesty to the landscape. It made no pretensions, concealed no secrets. Unlike Boston, where wealth and poverty existed side by side behind elegant facades, here everything was laid bare beneath the vast sky. Porterville appeared different in daylight as well. What had seemed a rough frontier town in the darkness revealed itself as a growing community with aspirations toward respectability. The main street boasted several brick buildings among the wooden structures, including a bank, a hotel, and the mercantile that would have been Clara's home. A small white church stood at one end of town, its steeple the highest point in the modest skyline. Ethan directed his horse to a hitching post outside a building marked Town Hall, helping Clara dismount with a steadying hand at her waist. The brief contact sent a surprising warmth through her despite the layer of clothing between them. "Mayor Hollister can be abrupt," Ethan warned as he tied the reins, "but he's fair-minded. The board's been trying to find a teacher for months, so they'll likely be eager to consider you." Clara smoothed her skirts and adjusted her hat, suddenly nervous. "Do I look presentable enough for an impromptu interview?" Ethan's gaze traveled from her face to her sensible boots and back again, the assessment brief but thorough. "You look like a proper Eastern lady, Miss Norwood. That alone will impress half the board." The meeting with Mayor Hollister and two other school board members, the town doctor and the bank manager, proved even more successful than Clara had anticipated. Her Boston education and clear-speaking manner seemed to overshadow her lack of teaching experience, and the desperation for a schoolteacher was evident in their eager questioning. "The term should have started 2 weeks ago," Mayor Hollister explained, a portly man with impressive mustaches and a businesslike manner. "We've got 40-some children aged 6 to 16 with nothing to do but cause mischief. When could you start, Miss Norwood?" "As soon as necessary," Clara replied, caught off guard by the directness of the question. "Though I would need time to prepare lessons and review the existing materials. The schoolhouse is fully equipped," Dr. Finch, a kindly older gentleman, assured her. "Books, slates, maps, everything Mrs. Peterson left when she returned east 2 years ago. The last teacher didn't believe in such modern nonsense as maps or literature, but they're still there." "And the living quarters?" Clara inquired, trying to maintain a professional demeanor despite her rising excitement. "2 rooms behind the schoolhouse," the bank manager, Mr. Dawson, replied. "Small but adequate for a single lady. Basic furnishings are provided. Salary is $40 a month, paid at the first of each month. School runs Monday through Friday, 8 to 3, with holidays as determined by the board." It was less than she would have earned as Mrs. Jenkins, but more independence than she would have enjoyed. Clara found herself nodding before she had consciously made the decision. "I accept the position, gentlemen, provided I may have 3 days to prepare before beginning classes." The relief on their faces was almost comical. Papers were produced, terms outlined and agreed upon, and within 30 minutes, Clara Norwood had become the new teacher of Porterville School. As they left the town hall, Clara felt slightly dazed by the swiftness of it all. "Did that really just happen?" she asked Ethan, who had remained a silent but supportive presence throughout the interview. He smiled a full, genuine smile that transformed his usually serious face. "Welcome to the West, Miss Norwood. Things tend to move quickly out here when they move at all." "Clara," she said impulsively. "You should call me Clara now that I'm to be a resident of your town." Something flickered in his eyes, pleasure, perhaps, or surprise. "Clara," he repeated, as if testing the feel of her name. "Then you must call me Ethan, at least when we're not in formal company." The simple exchange felt significant somehow, a small but meaningful shift in their relationship. They were no longer merely strangers thrown together by circumstance, but neighbors, perhaps even friends. "Would you like to see the schoolhouse?" Ethan asked. "It's at the far end of town, past the church." Clara nodded eagerly, and they set off down the main street, Ethan leading his horse by the reins as they walked side by side. Several townspeople nodded greetings, their curious glances at Clara quickly masked with frontier politeness. "Word travels fast," Ethan murmured, tipping his hat to a group of ladies exiting the general store. "By sundown, everyone in Porterville will know we have a new schoolteacher from Boston." "I hope they won't be disappointed," Clara said, suddenly anxious about the responsibility she had undertaken. "I've never taught before, not formally." "You'll do fine," Ethan assured her, his confidence seemingly unshakable. "These children need someone who cares enough to try. That's more than they've had recently." The schoolhouse stood on a small rise just beyond the church, a simple, white-painted building with a bell tower and large windows to admit light. Adjacent to it was a smaller structure that Clara assumed must be the teacher's quarters. Ethan produced a key from his pocket. "As a board member, I keep a spare," he explained, unlocking the schoolhouse door. The interior was dusty but otherwise in good condition. 10 rows of desks faced a larger teacher's desk on a raised platform. Bookshelves lined one wall, and maps were rolled neatly above the blackboard. It was plain but functional, with everything needed to begin teaching immediately. "What do you think?" Ethan asked, watching as Clara walked between the rows of desks, trailing her fingers along the worn wood. "It's perfect," she replied honestly. "It needs cleaning and organizing, but I can see its potential." They explored the teacher's quarters, next a small sitting room with a cast-iron stove, a narrow bedroom, and a lean-to kitchen with a pump for water. The furnishings were basic but adequate: a bed, a table with 2 chairs, a rocking chair near the stove, and a bookshelf. "It's small," Ethan said, misinterpreting her silence as disappointment. "No, it's not that," Clara assured him. "I'm just amazed. Yesterday, I arrived expecting to marry a man I'd never met. Today I'm a schoolteacher with my own home." She laughed softly. "Life can change so quickly." Ethan's expression softened as he leaned against the doorframe, hat in hand. "You're not having second thoughts, are you?" "No," Clara said firmly. "This feels right somehow. I came west seeking a new start, and that's exactly what I've found, just not in the way I expected." They rode back to the ranch in companionable silence, the initial awkwardness of their proximity having eased into something more comfortable. Clara found herself noticing small details about Ethan: the way the sun brought out auburn highlights in his dark hair, the strength in his hands as he handled the reins, the clean scent of soap beneath the leather and horses that seemed to define him. Catherine was delighted by the news of Clara's appointment, immediately suggesting they make curtains for the teacher's quarters and offering to help with the cleaning. "It will be wonderful having you nearby," she exclaimed as they prepared dinner together. Most of the town women are either much older or young mothers consumed with their children. "I've been longing for a friend my own age." "I feel the same," Clara admitted, surprised by how quickly she had come to care for the younger woman. "I'll need all the help and advice I can get about Porterville and its residents." The next 3 days passed in a blur of activity. True to her word, Catherine helped Clara clean and prepare both the schoolhouse and living quarters, turning the small space into a cozy home with the addition of curtains, cushions, and various small touches from the ranch. Ethan contributed by repairing a loose floorboard in the schoolhouse, fixing the water pump, and bringing a load of firewood for the stove. Clara divided her time between preparing lesson plans and getting to know the town. She visited each family with school-aged children, introducing herself and gathering information about their educational needs. Most received her warmly, clearly relieved to have the school reopening. On the evening before her first day of teaching, Clara sat on the porch of the Xavier Ranch, watching the sunset paint the western sky in shades of orange and pink. She had moved her few belongings to the teacher's quarters that afternoon, but had returned for a final dinner with the Xaviers before officially beginning her new life. Ethan joined her on the porch, offering a cup of coffee as he settled into the chair beside hers. "Nervous about tomorrow?" he asked. "Terrified," Clara admitted with a small laugh. "But excited too. I've met most of the children now, and they seem eager to learn." "They'll test you at first," Ethan warned. "It's the way of children everywhere. But stand firm, be fair, and they'll come around." Clara nodded, grateful for his advice and support. Over the past days, she had come to rely on his steady presence and practical wisdom. He wasn't a man of many words, but those he spoke carried weight. "I want to thank you," she said suddenly, turning to face him. "Not just for helping me that first night, but for everything since. I don't know what would have become of me without your kindness." Ethan studied her face in the fading light, his expression earnest. "You would have managed, Clara. You're stronger than you realize." The way he said her name soft, almost reverent, sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the evening breeze. They sat in silence for a moment, the air between them charged with something Clara dared not name. "Will I see you in town?" she asked finally, breaking the tension. "I come in every few days for supplies and mail," he replied. "And church on Sundays, weather permitting." "I'll look forward to it," Clara said, the words more revealing than she had intended. Catherine called them in for dinner then, sparing Clara from her own impulsivity. The meal was festive, with Catherine preparing Clara's favorite dishes from their short acquaintance, and even producing a small cake to celebrate her new position. As Clara prepared to leave, Ethan had insisted on escorting her to town despite her protests that she could ride the gentle mare they had lent her. She felt a curious mixture of excitement and regret. The Xavier Ranch had become a haven in the short time she had known it, and despite her anticipation for her new role, she found herself reluctant to leave. The ride to town was quiet, both of them seemingly lost in their own thoughts. When they reached the teacher's quarters, Ethan helped her dismount for what would be the last time. "You'll do well tomorrow," he said, standing perhaps a bit closer than propriety dictated. "The children of Porterville are fortunate to have you." "Thank you," Clara replied, suddenly aware of how alone she would be in the small house. "For everything." Ethan hesitated, as if wanting to say more, then simply nodded and stepped back. "Good night, Clara." "Good night, Ethan." She watched from the doorway as he rode away, his figure gradually disappearing into the darkness. Only then did she enter her new home, feeling both the weight and excitement of independence. The following weeks passed in a flurry of new experiences as Clara adjusted to her role as teacher. The children, as Ethan had predicted, tested her boundaries at first, particularly the older boys who had enjoyed their freedom during the school's closure. But Clara's firm yet kind approach gradually won them over, and by the end of the second week, even the most reluctant students were participating in lessons. True to his word, Ethan appeared in town regularly. Sometimes he would stop by the schoolhouse after classes to inquire about her welfare or bring some small item Catherine thought she might need. These brief visits became the highlights of Clara's week, though she tried not to examine too closely why her heart beat faster at the sight of his horse approaching. On Sundays, Clara attended services at the small church, where she found herself welcomed into the community. The minister's wife, Mrs. Abernathy, took particular interest in her, inviting her to join the Ladies' Aid Society and introducing her to other women in town. "Mr. Xavier seems to take a special interest in your well-being," Mrs. Abernathy remarked one Sunday as they watched Ethan speaking with the minister after services. "He's always been a polite man, but rather keeps to himself. It's nice to see him more sociable." Clara felt her cheeks warm. "He and his sister have been very kind to me. I arrived with nowhere to go, and they took me in until I found my position." "Indeed," Mrs. Abernathy replied with a knowing smile. "Very kind, though I notice it's rarely Catherine who rides into town to check on you." Before Clara could formulate a response, the subject of their conversation approached, hat in hand. "Good morning, Mrs. Abernathy, Miss Norwood. Fine service today." "Indeed, Mr. Xavier," the minister's wife replied. "I was just saying to Miss Norwood how nice it is to see you in town more regularly these days." If Ethan caught the implication in her tone, he gave no sign. Ranch business brings me in often enough. Miss Norwood, Catherine asked if you might join us for dinner today. She's eager to hear about your first month of teaching. Clara accepted gladly, having missed the Xavier's company despite her growing circle of acquaintances in town. The invitation became a regular Sunday occurrence, and gradually Clara found herself considered almost part of their family. As autumn progressed, Clara settled more comfortably into her role as teacher and her place in the community. The initial curiosity about the Eastern mail order bride who became a schoolteacher faded as she proved herself competent and dedicated. Parents expressed appreciation for her methods, which balanced traditional subjects with practical knowledge suited to frontier life. Her relationship with Ethan evolved as well, growing from tentative friendship to something deeper and more complex. He remained reserved in public, maintaining a respectful distance that satisfied propriety. But in private moments, walking her home from the ranch on Sundays, or lingering after delivering a message from Catherine, his guard lowered, revealing a thoughtful, occasionally humorous man who seemed increasingly drawn to her company. For her part, Clara found herself thinking of him at odd moments throughout her days, wondering what he would think of a particular book she was reading, imagining his reaction to her students' progress, or simply recalling the rare but transformative smile that seemed reserved for her alone. Yet neither spoke of these growing feelings, the unspoken attraction hanging between them like a delicate thread neither dared to test for fear it might break. October brought the town's Harvest Festival, an event Clara had heard about for weeks from excited students and their parents. The schoolhouse was closed for 2 days as everyone in Porterville participated in the celebration, which included contests, dancing, and abundant food. "You must wear something special," Catherine insisted when Clara visited the ranch the weekend before. "The Harvest Dance is the social event of the season." Clara laughed, sorting through her limited wardrobe with the younger woman. "I'm afraid special wasn't a consideration when I packed for a new life as a merchant's wife. Everything I own is practical rather than festive." Catherine's eyes lit up. "I have just the thing, Mother's blue silk. She wore it to the spring dance the year before she died. With a few alterations, it would fit you perfectly." Despite Clara's protest that such a loan was too generous, Catherine insisted, producing a beautiful gown of deep blue silk with delicate lace trim. It was slightly outdated by Eastern standards, but would be the height of fashion in Porterville. "Mother would have liked you," Catherine said softly as Clara tried on the dress. She always said Ethan needed someone with spirit to match his stubbornness. Clara blushed, avoiding the younger woman's knowing gaze. "Catherine, your brother and I are friends, nothing more." "Of course," Catherine agreed, her tone making it clear she believed otherwise. "Just friends who light up when they see each other and find endless reasons to be in the same place." Before Clara could form a suitable denial, Ethan's voice called from downstairs, ending the conversation but not the thoughts it had provoked. The morning of the Harvest Festival dawned clear and cool, perfect weather for the outdoor activities planned before the evening dance. Clara spent the day moving between various booths and contests, delighting in her students' excitement and the community spirit that infused the celebration. Ethan appeared midday, looking unusually formal in a clean shirt and vest, his hair neatly combed beneath his best hat. "Enjoying the festivities?" he asked, falling into step beside her as she watched the children competing in sack races. "It's wonderful," Clara replied sincerely. "So different from Boston's formal affairs. Everyone here seems genuinely happy to be together." "Harvest has always been a time for celebration," Ethan explained. "The hard work of summer is done, the bounty stored for winter, and people can relax a bit before the rains come." They walked together through the fairgrounds, stopping occasionally to speak with townspeople or watch various contests. Clara noticed several speculative glances directed their way, but found she didn't mind the implied connection. Being seen with Ethan Xavier was no hardship, especially when he was as attentive as he was today. "Will you be attending the dance tonight?" he asked as they shared an apple pie at one of the food stalls. Clara nodded, suddenly nervous about the evening ahead. Catherine lent me a dress for the occasion. She insisted jeans, everyday teaching clothes wouldn't do. "She's right," Ethan agreed, a smile touching his lips. "Though you look fine in whatever you wear." The compliment, delivered in his straightforward manner, brought warmth to Clara's cheeks. Before she could respond, one of her students ran up, insisting she come judge the vegetable display where his family's enormous pumpkin was entered. With an apologetic glance at Ethan, Clara allowed herself to be pulled away, her thoughts lingering on his words and the look that had accompanied them. That evening, as Clara prepared for the dance in her small quarters, she found herself taking unusual care with her appearance. Catherine's blue silk dress fit remarkably well after minor adjustments, the color bringing out the blue undertones in her dark hair. She arranged her hair more elaborately than usual, allowing a few curls to frame her face while securing the rest in a neat arrangement at the nape of her neck. A knock at her door startled her as she was fastening a simple silver necklace, one of the few pieces of jewelry she had brought from Boston. Opening the door revealed Ethan, looking more handsome than ever in a dark suit that must have been reserved for special occasions. "Catherine sent me to escort you," he explained, his eyes widening slightly as he took in her appearance. "You look beautiful, Clara." The simple, direct compliment affected her more than the most flowery praise ever had in Boston. "Thank you," she replied, suddenly shy despite the months of acquaintance between them. "You look very handsome yourself." He offered his arm with a formality that seemed at odds with their usual easy companionship. "Shall we?" Catherine's already there, helping with the refreshments. The town hall had been transformed for the occasion. Harvest decorations adorned the walls, tables laden with food lined one side of the room, and a small group of musicians played lively tunes while couples danced in the cleared center space. Clara found herself immediately swept into the festivities, greeting her students and their parents, accepting compliments on her dress, and even being persuaded to join a group dance that required no partner. Throughout it all, she remained aware of Ethan's presence nearby, his eyes finding hers across the room with increasing frequency as the evening progressed. Finally, as the musicians began a waltz, he approached her directly. "Would you honor me with this dance, Miss Norwood?" he asked formally, extending his hand. Clara placed her fingers in his, feeling the familiar calluses that spoke of hard work and a life lived outdoors. "I would be delighted, Mr. Xavier." His hand at her waist was warm and steady as he guided her into the dance, maintaining a proper distance while still holding her closer than she had been to any man since arriving in Porterville. They moved well together, finding a natural rhythm despite the crowded floor. "I didn't know you could dance," Clara remarked, surprised by his graceful movements. A smile touched his lips. "Mother insisted we learn. Said no child of hers would stumble around a dance floor like a newborn colt." "She sounds like a remarkable woman." She was, Ethan agreed, his expression softening with memory. Strong-willed, educated, completely unsuited for frontier life, yet determined to make it work. "Rather like someone else I know." The comparison warmed Clara's heart. "I would have liked to meet her." "She would have liked you," he replied, echoing Catherine's earlier sentiment. "She always hoped I'd find someone with both sense and sensibility." The literary reference surprised and pleased Clara, reminding her that there was more to this quiet rancher than met the eye. "You've read Jane Austen?" Mother's influence again. She brought a library west with her and insisted we be as familiar with books as with horses and cattle. They continued to dance, their conversation flowing more easily than ever before. Clara found herself laughing at Ethan's dry observations about their neighbors and sharing stories of her students' antics. When the music ended, neither seemed eager to part. "Would you care to step outside for some air?" Ethan suggested, his hand still resting lightly at her waist. "It's getting rather warm in here." The October night was crisp and clear, stars scattered like diamonds across the velvet sky. Several couples had the same idea, dotting the area around the town hall with quiet conversations and occasional laughter. Ethan led Clara to a wooden bench set beneath an old oak tree, far enough from the hall to offer privacy without impropriety. The music drifted faintly from the open windows, providing a pleasant backdrop to their conversation. "Are you happy here, Clara?" Ethan asked suddenly, his voice low and serious. "In Porterville, I mean." She considered the question carefully. "Yes," she answered honestly. "It's not what I expected when I came west, but I've found purpose here and community. The children need me, and I've come to care for them deeply. And the town? The people?" His eyes searched hers in the dim light. "I've grown fond of Porterville," Clara admitted. "It's becoming home in a way Boston never truly was, at least not in recent years. Ethan nodded, seeming to weigh her words. I worried at first that you might find it too primitive, too far from the civilization you were accustomed to. I was accustomed to being an object of pity, Clara replied candidly. The daughter of a once prosperous family reduced to genteel poverty. Here, I'm valued for what I can contribute, not judged for what I've lost. A moment of silence stretched between them, comfortable yet charged with unspoken thoughts. Finally, Ethan shifted slightly to face her more directly. Clara, I find myself thinking of you at the most unexpected moments, he began, his voice steady despite the personal nature of his confession. When I'm checking fences in the north pasture, or breaking a new horse, or reading by the fire in the evening, you're there in my thoughts. Clara's breath caught at his words, so closely mirroring her own experience. I think of you too, she admitted softly. More often than I should, perhaps. Encouraged, he continued. I know this isn't what you came west for. You expected to be a merchant's wife, not. He hesitated, then pressed on. But I find myself wondering if there might be a possibility for something between us, something more than friendship. The directness of his approach was so typically Ethan, no flowery declarations or dramatic gestures, just honest words from a man who valued truth above all else. Clara found it infinitely more appealing than the practiced charm of Eastern suitors. I would like that very much, she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Relief and joy transformed his features as he reached for her hand, enfolding it in his larger one. I'm not a man of fancy words, Clara. I can't promise the kind of life you might have had in Boston, but I can promise to respect you, care for you, and do everything in my power to make you happy. I don't want fancy words, Clara assured him, her heart full to bursting. I want honesty, partnership, and the way I feel when I'm with you. Ethan's free hand rose to gently touch her cheek, his fingers warm against her skin. May I kiss you, Clara Norwood? Her answer was to lean forward slightly, closing the distance between them in silent invitation. His lips met hers with gentle pressure, the contact brief but filled with promise. It was a proper kiss, mindful of their public location, yet it contained such tenderness that Clara felt it down to her toes. When they parted, Ethan's expression was one of wonder mingled with determination. I'll speak to Reverend Abernathy tomorrow, he said. Ask his permission to court you properly. I know it's sudden, but Clara pressed her fingers to his lips, halting his words. Not sudden at all, she corrected him. We've been moving toward this moment since you rode up to the depot that first evening. His smile, then full and unguarded, was something she knew she would treasure forever. Stay with me, he whispered, echoing those first words at the depot but imbuing them with new meaning. Always, Clara replied, sealing the promise with another gentle kiss. Their courtship progressed with the same straightforward honesty that characterized their relationship from the beginning. Ethan called formally at the teacher's quarters 2 evenings a week, often bringing books from his mother's collection that he thought Clara might enjoy. They attended church together on Sundays, followed by dinner at the ranch with Catherine, who made little attempt to hide her delight at the development. The town observed this romance with approving interest. Clara's position as schoolteacher made her a respected figure in the community, and Ethan's standing as a successful rancher and school board member meant their courtship met with general approval. Even Mrs. Abernathy, the self-appointed guardian of Porterville's moral standards, could find no fault with their proper behavior. As November brought cooler weather and occasional rain, Clara found herself increasingly drawn to the warmth and comfort of the Xavier Ranch. Though she maintained her independence and took her teaching responsibilities seriously, weekends spent with Ethan and Catherine became precious respites from the solitude of her small quarters behind the schoolhouse. One Sunday in late November, as they sat before the fire after dinner, Ethan surprised Clara by asking a question she had not anticipated. "Would you consider having Christmas dinner with us?" he asked, his tone casual though his eyes conveyed deeper meaning. "Catherine and I would be honored to have you join our family celebration." Clara glanced at Catherine, who was pretending great interest in her needlework while obviously listening intently. "I would love to," she replied, touched by the invitation. "I was dreading spending the holiday alone." "You'll never need to be alone on a holiday again," Ethan said quietly, the simple statement carrying the weight of a promise that extended far beyond Christmas dinner. That evening, as they walked the short distance from the main house to the barn where Clara's borrowed mare was stabled, Ethan stopped suddenly, turning to face her in the silver moonlight. "I had planned to wait until Christmas," he began, his voice uncharacteristically nervous. "Had it all arranged in my mind, the right moment, the right words. But standing here now, I can't think of any reason to wait another day." Clara's heart began to race as he took both her hands in his expression earnest in the pale light. "Clara Norwood, you came west expecting one life and found another. I thank God every day that Harold Jenkins' letter brought you to that depot, and that I was the one sent to meet you." Dropping to one knee in the damp grass, Ethan continued, "I love you, Clara. Your intelligence, your courage, your kind heart. I want to build a life with you, raise horses and cattle, perhaps children someday. Would you do me the great honor of becoming my wife?" Tears of joy sprang to Clara's eyes as she gazed down at this man who had come to mean everything to her. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, Ethan Xavier, I will marry you." He rose swiftly, gathering her into an embrace that lifted her feet from the ground, his laughter mingling with hers in the still night air. When he set her down, his kiss was less restrained than their previous encounters, communicating a depth of feeling that words could never fully express. "I love you," Clara said when they finally parted, the declaration feeling both momentous and perfectly natural. "I never expected to find love when I came west, but now I can't imagine my life without you." They decided on a Christmas Eve wedding, small and intimate, with only the closest friends in attendance. Catherine threw herself into preparations with enthusiastic abandon, determined that her brother and soon-to-be sister would have a celebration worthy of their love story. Word of their engagement spread quickly through Porterville, met with general approval and only the mildest gossip about the relatively short duration of their courtship. Clara's students were particularly delighted, the younger ones especially excited by their teacher's fairy tale romance with the handsome rancher. The weeks leading to Christmas passed in a blur of teaching duties, wedding preparations, and precious moments with Ethan. He began renovations on the ranch house, expanding the master bedroom and adding a private sitting room that would be Clara's alone, a place for reading, writing, and quiet reflection. "I want you to feel it's truly your home," he explained as he showed her the plans. "Not just my mother's house that you're moving into, but ours together." His thoughtfulness in these matters only deepened Clara's certainty that she had found a partner in the truest sense, a man who valued her independence and identity even as they committed to a shared life. On Christmas Eve morning, Clara awoke in the teacher's quarters for the last time, her wedding dress, a creation of ivory, satin, and lace that Catherine had helped her design, hanging on the wardrobe door. By evening, she would be Mrs. Ethan Xavier, a transformation both profound and, somehow, perfectly natural. Catherine arrived mid-morning to help with preparations, bringing with her Mrs. Abernathy and two other ladies from town who had become Clara's friends over the past months. "Ethan's a nervous wreck," Catherine confided with sisterly affection as she arranged Clara's hair. "I've never seen him so flustered, checking his pocket watch every 5 minutes, polishing his boots twice, changing his shirt 3 times. Clara laughed, relieved to know her own butterflies were matched by her groom's. "And here I thought nothing could shake his composure." "Oh, you've shaken it from the moment you arrived," Catherine assured her. "I've never seen my stoic brother so thoroughly captivated." The simple ceremony took place in the church, decorated with evergreen boughs and red berries for the holiday. Reverend Abernathy officiated before an intimate gathering of friends who had become like family in the months since Clara's arrival. Catherine stood as her bridesmaid, while Miguel, the ranch foreman who had become Ethan's right-hand man, served as best man. When Clara walked down the aisle, wearing her mother's pearl earrings and carrying a small bouquet of winter roses Catherine had somehow procured, the look on Ethan's face was one she knew she would remember until her dying day, a mixture of awe, adoration, and absolute certainty that transcended any doubts or fears. The vows were traditional but spoken with profound sincerity, each word invested with personal meaning. When Ethan slipped the simple gold band onto Clara's finger, a ring that had belonged to his grandmother, repolished for its new bearer. His hands were steady, his gaze unwavering. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Reverend Abernathy declared, his voice carrying through the small church. "You may kiss your bride." Ethan's kiss was gentle but thorough, a public declaration of private feelings that brought applause from their assembled friends. As they turned to face the congregation as husband and wife, Clara felt a sense of rightness, of having found her true place in the world. The celebration continued at the Xavier Ranch, where Catherine had prepared a feast with Elena's help. The house glowed with lamplight and Christmas decorations, a warm haven against the cold December night. Music, laughter, and heartfelt toasts filled the evening as the small community celebrated not just the union of two people they had come to respect and love, but the spirit of Christmas and the promise of new beginnings. As the night drew to a close and the last guest departed, Clara found herself standing on the porch with Ethan, watching snowflakes begin to drift lazily from the dark sky. "It's snowing," she said with childlike wonder, extending her hand to catch a flake. A white Christmas after all. Ethan wrapped his arm around her waist, drawing her close against the chill. "A good omen, they say. Beginning a marriage with snow means a clean slate, a fresh start." Clara leaned into his embrace, marveling at how natural it felt to stand with him as wife and husband, their futures irrevocably entwined. "I can't think of a better Christmas gift than this moment, right here with you." Ethan's kiss was tender, his arms strong and secure around her. When they parted, his expression was one of profound contentment mingled with unmistakable desire. "Welcome home, Mrs. Xavier," he murmured, leading her back inside to begin their life together. Spring came early to the foothills that year, bringing with it an explosion of wildflowers across the hills surrounding the Xavier Ranch. Clara, now 4 months a wife, found herself blossoming alongside the landscape, her happiness evident in everything from her expanded curriculum at the school to the flourishing garden she had planted behind the ranch house. Marriage to Ethan had proven even more fulfilling than she had anticipated. He was a considerate husband, valuing her opinions and supporting her continued teaching even as she took on the responsibilities of a rancher's wife. They settled into a rhythm that balanced independence with partnership, each contributing their strengths to their shared life. Catherine remained at the ranch, her presence a comfort rather than an intrusion. The sisters-in-law had grown even closer, with Catherine teaching Clara the practicalities of ranch management, while Clara introduced her to new books and ideas from her Eastern education. As April drew to a close, Clara received news that brought their happiness full circle. Confirmed by Dr. Finch and shared first with Ethan during a private ride to their favorite viewpoint overlooking the valley, the knowledge that they would welcome a child in late November filled them both with joyful anticipation. "A Christmas baby," Ethan marveled, his hand gentle on Clara's still flat abdomen. "Our family begins exactly 1 year after our wedding." Clara covered his hand with her own, imagining the life growing beneath their joined fingers. "I never dreamed such happiness was possible when I stood alone at that depot last September." Ethan's eyes, warm with love, met hers. "I knew from the moment I saw you standing there, so brave and determined despite being abandoned, that you were someone special. I just never imagined you'd be mine." "I became yours the moment you whispered, 'Stay with me,'" Clara replied softly. "Everything that's happened since has only confirmed what my heart knew that evening." Their son, William Ethan Xavier, arrived 2 weeks early, on a clear December night with the winter's first snow falling gently outside the bedroom window. Catherine and Dr. Finch assisted with the delivery, while Ethan paced the hallway until his son's first cry brought him rushing to Clara's side. "He's perfect," Ethan whispered, tears glistening unashamedly in his eyes as he held his son for the first time. Strong, like his mother. Clara, exhausted but radiant, watched the tableau of father and son with overwhelming love. "He has your eyes," she observed as the newborn blinked up at his father. "And I suspect he'll have your stubborn nature as well." The years that followed brought changes both expected and surprising. The Xavier Ranch prospered under their joint management, with Clara applying her education to the business aspects while Ethan focused on expanding their horse breeding program. Their family grew with the addition of twin daughters, Elizabeth and Anne, in the spring of 1878, completing their family with chaotic joy. Clara continued teaching for 2 more years before reluctantly resigning to focus on raising their children and managing the increasingly successful ranch. She remained involved with the school as a board member, however, helping to recruit qualified teachers and expand the curriculum to include more advanced subjects for older students. Porterville grew as well, the railroad finally extending a proper spur line to the town in 1880, bringing increased commerce and new residents. Jenkins Mercantile, now run by his nephew Robert, expanded to a 2-story building that became the centerpiece of the growing Main Street. Through it all, the bond between Clara and Ethan deepened and strengthened, their love story becoming something of a local legend, the Eastern mail order bride and the rancher who found each other through chance and circumstance. On their 10th anniversary, as they sat on the porch watching their children play in the yard, Ethan presented Clara with a small velvet box. Inside lay a delicate gold locket, and within it, a tiny slip of paper. Clara opened it carefully, finding a message written in Ethan's strong hand. "Stay with me forever." Tears filled her eyes as she recalled those first whispered words at the depot, now transformed into a decade of love, partnership, and family. "Always," she replied, the same answer she had given that night at the harvest dance so many years before. As the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Ethan took her hand, his touch as reassuring and thrilling as it had been from the beginning. Together they watched their children, their legacy of love, against the backdrop of the land that had brought them together, 2 souls who had found each other at a dusty train depot and built a life more beautiful than either could have imagined. In the years that followed, the Xavier family remained a cornerstone of the Porterville community. William grew into a thoughtful young man with his father's affinity for horses and his mother's love of books. The twins, while identical in appearance, developed distinct personalities: Elizabeth, the practical rancher, and the dreamer and artist. Clara never regretted the twist of fate that had brought her west as a mail-order bride, only to find herself abandoned at the depot. For in that moment of greatest uncertainty, she had found not just a husband, but a true partner, not just a home, but a place where she truly belonged. And it had all begun with those simple words, whispered by a man on horseback as the sun set on what seemed like the end of her dreams: "Stay with me." Words that had led not to an ending, but to the most beautiful beginning she could have imagined.